Hello folks, Jason Chrisman here of JC's Bees. Today I'm sitting here in my small mating yard that I'm trying to get accomplished. It's mostly made up of nukes, and a few of these nukes I'll be selling. The rest will be used to get my queens mated that I'll be starting to sell this year. I'm pretty proud of this accomplishment. It's taken me a few years to get everything lined up and get my ducks in a row, but here I am. Or maybe I should say my bees in a row. When I set my mating yard up, or set this yard up, I looked at several different kinds of bee feeders. I really like the division board or the frame feeder, but that takes an extra space inside the nuke, so that would only leave me with room for 4 frames, where typically these would hold 5 frames each. So from there I went to the mason jar feeder. You got the entrance feeder. My nukes, I like the holes better than the entrance across the whole bottom, so that wasn't going to work for me. So you have the mason jars with the perforated holes in the lid, and you set on top of the lid and kind of bubbles down off the bottom, and the bees are able to drink it. Those work fine, but I've had a lot of trouble with them over the years. Either they leak, or the bees just don't drink it like they would in a division board feeder. So I wanted to try something else, and I did a little bit of digging to see what everybody else was using for their mating nukes. And this is what I discovered. They're taking these mason jars, drilling holes in the lid, and then either putting a copper line or a brake line sticking out the top, and they solder it in place. This has worked wonderfully, wonderfully. Here you can see the brake line welded right to the inside, or soldered. It ain't welded. But I'm going to show you today how to make these. And in my instructions to make it, I wasn't real clear on the length. I think I said I make them 1.25 inches on the brake line. But something I've learned since making the video, I want to point out. What you want to do is take your top cover, figure out the thickness of your top cover. That's how much line or nipple you want sticking outside of the jar. The simple reason being is, in this instructional part, you're going to hear me say that I make these like 1.25 inches long or something to that length. And when I made them and stuck them on the feeder, what would happen is the tubing would stick all the way through the bottom, and if it wasn't between the frames, it wouldn't go down all the way. So since then, I've made adjustments, and now you can see mine is perfectly smooth with the bottom. So it doesn't matter if it's right between the frames. The bees are able to come up on top of the frames and drink right from the bottom of the lid here. I'm going to bring it in a little closer so you can see how smooth. So just keep that in mind when you cut your brake line. And on the inside, you know, of course, the more you have to the inside, the more syrup you're going to have left in the jar when you're done. If it sticks up 1 inch, you're going to have 1 inch of syrup left. If it sticks up 1/2 inch, you're going to have 1/2 inch. So the less that you have of tubing on the inside of the lid, the more syrup they will be able to drink. Keep these facts in mind when you're watching the rest of this video, because I did not point them out when I was recording the step-by-step process. I've learned a little bit more since then, and I wanted to point that out right at the beginning. So watch the rest, see what you think, and we'll join back together at the end. Step's going to be cutting your brake line down using a pipe cutter, and I like to cut mine to about 1.25 inches. It leaves 1/4 inch on the inside of the mason jar and 1 inch sticking out. And since there's a coating on the outside of the brake line, I'm going to take it to my belt sander and take the coating off. That will allow the solder to stick to the brake line. You can see here that I only took the coating off of the very end, and that's because we're only going to let 1/4 inch, or that's how I like them. I like 1/4 inch to the inside, so basically it's just the very tip where the solder sticks to. So that's the part I needed cleaned. Next thing we're going to do is I'm going to take my drill and I'm going to drill a hole right in the center of these, the same size as the brake line. What I did is I went ahead and drilled them while they're in their case. That way you ain't got to really hold them too much. And the next thing I'm going to do is cut the plastic off of the case, take me a piece of 150 grit, and sand right around the hole. That'll take off the shininess and give something for the solder to stick to. See, I've roughed it up a little bit with some sandpaper around the holes, and that'll help the solder stick. The very next thing we're going to do is I'm going to use a little bit of this flux, and I'm going to take a little bit and I'm going to rub it on my finger, and I'm going to go around and rub it on each one of these. You'll want to wash these after you get them all soldered up to get the flux and any residue that's left behind from soldering. We're going to wipe that on all the lids, and then we're going to go back and coat the part we sanded on the brake line. And what that's going to do is going to make the solder stick right where we sanded. Okay, so now we'll go back and I'll go back and rub it on the ends of the brake line, and then we'll move on. So everything's drilled, sanded, coated with flux, and placed in the hole. The next thing we're going to do is I'm going to take my little pin torch and go around and solder each one. Little pin torch versus the big Coleman torches, just because they get a little bit too hot. The pin torch works really well and doesn't seem to burn the paint too much on the bottom of the lid. So you're going to heat the area where the flux is, then you're going to come in with your solder, and the solder is immediately going to suck right around that hole. And that's it. I like to move the solder around, or move it around a little bit till the solder dries. And that's it. Move on to the next one. There you go, folks. It literally took me less than 2 minutes to go around and do these 9 and get them soldered. I didn't do these 3 just because these are what I need today. So I'll just leave these in the case until I need them. But now I'll take them in and wash off any residue, run them through the sink and some dishwater and clean them all up. And then I'll get some feed in them and get them on my splits. So I hope this helped you, and in case you're not aware, you will need to drill a hole through your top cover to fit the brake line, and then when you're not using it, you're able to just stick a dowel rod or some kind of plug in the hole. So there you go, folks. Not a whole lot to it. They're pretty easy to make. You can see that if you had all your jars laid out and your tools all set up, you could blow out a whole bunch of these in no time. So if you have any questions or comments about this particular type of feeder, please leave them in the comments below, and I'll do the best I can to answer them. And you'll also notice in the description below my video, I'm starting to link some of the products that I use on a regular basis. Feel free to check them out and see if there's anything that maybe you're needing. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. That helps boost this video in the YouTube search ranks so more people can find it, and I appreciate that. And thanks again, folks.